perverse mouth do I hate. Anything else in chapter 8?
That fear, I know we talked about it before, but that fear is not afraid of as in, I'm scared and hiding. It's respect, isn't it?
Yeah, it's reverence, a high degree of reverence. Chapter 9, the American Standard has wisdom's feast and invitation. Before chapter 10, you notice in 10 the Proverbs of Solomon, and then they're kind of disconnected. But 9 ends that, and it talks about here's a relation that we have that we're trying to encourage someone or help someone. Verse 7, he who corrects a scoffer, what? Gets himself reviling. Yeah, he that reproves a wicked man gets himself a blot. Reprove not a scoffer, lest he hate thee. Reprove a wise man, and he will what? Love thee. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be yet wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning. Coach Saban has said a lot about that. I'm sure other coaches have. That there's a lot of players that if you correct them, they think it's a personal thing. You know, rather than just saying, hey, I'm trying to help you be the best you can be at this position. And they're Bible ideas that when somebody is doing something wrong and was, hey, that's not right, this is the way to do it, then they get mad at you. Well, you don't need to get mad. You just say, thank you, I didn't know better, and now I do. And and that can go in a lot of ways. I may have told you, well, I know I've told you about it, so I won't tell you again. But somebody older says, hey, buddy, I think you're making a mistake. This is the way of doing business. This will help you in marriage. This will help you in business. This will help you. Instead of just pushing off, okay, consider it at least. Think about it. All right, let's see. 10 begins the various and sundry proverbs concerning the differences between wicked people and righteous. Anything in chapter 10? I mean, there's so much. Every verse is a sermon just about. But
19.
What was that, 18? 19. Yes. In the multitude of words, there won't not transgression, but he that refrains his lips doeth well. That's reminiscent of James 1, isn't it? Let every man be swift to hear, but slow to speak. Yeah. Is it a good thing? I've heard all my life people say, well, I just say whatever comes to mind. That's not anything to boast about. No, oftentimes we need to rein in our tongues. Chapter 11, a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. That goes all the way back. Just be what to everybody? Fair. Be fair to everybody. Yeah, don't try to jump someone out of something. Verse 12, he that despises his neighbor is void of wisdom, but a man of understanding holds his peace. A lot on self-control in the Proverbs. You have to work with that, don't you, Delonte, with a lot of the players. Self-control. You have to do that, don't you, buddy? Verse 22, as a ring of gold in a swine's snout, so is the fair woman that is without discretion. We've seen that. Chapter 12, whoso loveth correction, verse 1, loves knowledge. That is, if I'm wrong about something, I want to be right. And he that hates reproof is brutish. Verse 4 is a great statement. A worthy woman is the crown of her husband, but she that maketh ashamed is as rottenness in his bones. Reminds us of another proverb. House and riches are an inheritance of fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. Yeah, the arrangements of the Lord for marriage are for our good when people do what's right. Verse 15. The way of a fool is what? Right in his own eyes, but he that is wise hearkens unto counsel. Can you see almost a refrain through this? Listen to what?
Wisdom.
Listen to wisdom. Listen to wise counsel. Don't just, go off half-cocked. Go, listen to what is wise, and we'll see that throughout.
In chapter 6, I believe, he begins the personification of wisdom and speaks from wisdom this, wisdom that, wisdom, and uses the feminine to refer to wisdom.
To wisdom, yes, her. That's a good point. That's exactly right. Anyone else? David, looks like you had a thought. Anyone? Brother Farron?
26,
Well, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
verse 26 in chapter
12:26. The righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked causes them to err.
What did yours say?
The righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked causes them to err, or err, E-R-R.
The New King James says the righteous should choose his friends carefully.
Okay. And that's true.
The way of the wicked leads them astray.
Yeah, the word neighbor would, in the American Standard, would obviously, and I didn't check that out, but that would be your friend. Your neighbor would be your friend. Yeah. Good point, Pat. Randy, you have something? All right, any others? As we've already noticed, Wednesday nights are our longer review, but let's go on to Acts 11. We wanted to tie up the loose ends of Acts 11 that we were trying to do Sunday morning, and I didn't do much of a job on it. We've got, let's just go through Acts 2. What do we have today? What? All right, where do we find Ananias and Sapphira? Watch out. Fine, good. Stephen's speech, 7. Saul's conversion, good. Conversion of the Ethiopian, good. Matthias is appointed. Matthias is appointed. 1, okay, good. Jesus ascends into heaven, 1, all right, good. 8 through 12, transition chapters, the gospel begins to radiate from Jerusalem because of what? Persecution. The death of Stephen. Very good. Okay, so this was a chart that we put together, I think, last Wednesday. In 11, 19, and 20, it's after Peter's recount of what had happened at the household of Cornelius back in Jerusalem. Then Luke records what had happened. He recalls after the tribulation that arose about Stephen, people from Phoenicia, Cyprus, and Antioch spoke the word to none save to Jews. But some of them, men of Cyprus and Cyrene, when they came to Antioch, spoke to whom? Hellenists or Greeks. And so you have people from Cyprus and here in Cyrene are going to Antioch, and we pointed out the significance of Antioch last week. Things are in readiness for the gospel to be spread. We talked about some of this, the significance of Luke's language, that when Barnabas had gone to Antioch, earlier they spoke the word and the Lord Jesus, and when Barnabas, those who believe, turned to the Lord, Barnabas encouraged them to cleave to the Lord. They were gathered together. Everything is pointing to who? The Lord. And we talked about this Sunday morning about denominational concepts, really. Let's see, we went over that, the Bowles commentary. And this is another thing, relative to the idea that the disciples were called what? Christians, first in Antioch. And this is something that I don't believe I emphasize much. Just as Christians earlier had been designated as disciples and saints, brethren, believers, those of the way, each of these descriptions showed their relation either to the Lord, they were disciples of the Lord, they were set apart. The brothers showed their relation, a family relation to each other. Believers of the Lord, those of the way, I am the way, the truth, and life. It showed their relation either to the Lord or themselves. And when that was the case, unity was possible. Those designations accurately describe their relation to the Lord and each other. Division, even in local churches, was condemned during the first century. In 1 Corinthians 1:10, Paul said, I beseech you, brethren, through the authority of the, or by the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, that you all speak the what? Same thing. That there be no divisions among you, but that you be perfected together in the same mind and in the same judgment. And then he says, because it's been signified to me by some of the household of Chloe, that there are divisions among you. And he started specifying. Some say, I am of Paul, I am of Apollos, some Cephas, some of Christ. Then he asked 3 questions. Is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Were you baptized into the name of Paul? And of course the answers are negative on all of those things. No. And so since they were not, Paul didn't die for them, they were not baptized, they don't call themselves Paulites or Cephasites. Well, as time passed, history records how an apostasy occurred in an organization, as well as designations for offices for which there was no authority in the New Testament. And that's with the rise of Roman Catholicism. And the idea of one saying that he's a Christian, but having to modify it by a Baptist Christian, or a Methodist Christian, or a Presbyterian Christian, or a Catholic, or Mormon, or Witnesses, or Seventh-day Adventist, you just going down the line. All of those indicate that there's what? Division. There's division. There's division. All indicate divisions as well as organizational structures unfounded in the New Testament. Names outside the Scripture evidence ideas and practices outside the Scriptures. Let us speak and practice. Peter says, if any man speak, let him speak as the oracles or utterances of God. The old adage that we call Bible things by Bible names, and we do Bible things in Bible ways. You know that that's a right principle based on all the teaching of the New Testament. We don't call the Lord's Supper the Eucharist. Why? Catholics do. And it's really not the Lord's Supper. They don't. Why do we not call it the Eucharist?
That's a Christian Catholic term.
Yeah, it's called the Lord's Supper in 1 Corinthians 11. It's called the Communion in 1 Corinthians 10. It's called the breaking of bread in Acts 2 and Acts 20. So we're calling things, it's kind of like, well, how can I illustrate this? In a lot of ways, when any profession has its own vocabulary, like Dante with coaching, with air conditioning, with David, with electrical work, Brother Gene. Every area of some profession has its vocabulary, and the vocabulary is significant because what your words are describing particular what? Actions, particular ideas, particular parts that are significant. If someone said, well, I'm going to call this part by a different name, then it leads to confusion. Well, here's an 18-year-old young man who belongs to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he has a little black badge. It says Elder Steve Jones or something like that, Elder. And you look at him and say, well, he's not older, he's younger. And so they apply a Bible term, but not Bible ideas. It's a misnomer. And so what we want to do is call Bible. Here's a person who says, well, you ask them, were you baptized? Have you been baptized scripturally? Yeah, I was sprinkled when my mom and dad had me sprinkled by a Catholic priest when I was a baby. And they call that baptism. But Bible baptism is what? It's an immersion. And so that's calling one thing something that it's really not. So that's why we want to go back and call Bible things Bible names and do Bible things in Bible ways in every area. Going back, I didn't bring my book. I did Sunday and then couldn't get into it. In the rise of Roman Catholicism, I made this point earlier, I know, but just to in time, in the 2nd century, people who were in the elderships, who were a little more knowledgeable, maybe older, they were called presiding elders over elders. And then the presiding elders began to be known as what? Bishops. Well, in the New Testament, they were all one and the same. They were all the same. And so you have designations that God did not make. And it led to a full-scale apostasy with the Pope in Rome. We went over that. All right, a couple of things, other things that we didn't get to Sunday. Who comes to Antioch and says there's going to be a worldwide famine and it's going to be really hard hit down in Judea? Agabus, right. And if you'll notice in Acts 11:27, in those days there came down prophets, the plural, prophets from Jerusalem unto Antioch. And Agabus signifies by the Spirit that there should be a great famine over all the world, which came to pass in the days of Claudius. And the disciples, according to his ability, determined to send relief to the brethren that dwelt in Judea, which also they did, sending it to the elders, brethren in Judea, by the hands of Barnabas and Saul. I put together a little chart on prophets that I don't think I've done before. This is the only New Testament reference to prophets traveling in a group. You remember in Acts 2, when Peter quotes from Joel 2, he said, in the last days, the Spirit will be poured forth on all flesh. Your young men shall see visions, your old men shall dream dreams. Yea, and on my handmaidens will I pour, handmaids, and so you have women as well, both among men and women. And from other passages, women would not have prophesied in assemblies of churches, but likely in private settings. In this should, I didn't note that. That's 1 Corinthians 14:34 and 35. There's a prohibition there. I permit not, well, that's 1 Timothy 2. The women are not to speak in the assembly, in the church. For, he says, it's a shame for a woman, any woman, to speak in the church. And in chapter 11, verse 5, he talked about women who would pray or prophesy. And so I know from chapter 14 that they would not have done it in the assembly, especially 1 Timothy 2, the restrictions that are there given. So what would you conclude if they did prophesy? And we do have, if you look at the second bullet point, Acts mentions specifically Agabus here, and then also in chapter 21, verse 10. And there were certain ones in Antioch, Judas and Silas, and then 4 daughters of Philip. Philip the evangelist had 4 virgin daughters, it says, who prophesied. But they wouldn't have done it in an assembly, but likely in other settings that would be private. Luke describes their actions in the area of prediction, as Agabus did here. And then in chapter 21, verse 10, he took Paul's girdle, and he said, bound his hands with it, and said, the man who owns this is going to be bound when he goes to Jerusalem. So there was a predictive element to what he said. In 1532, Judas and Silas exhorted the brethren, called prophets. And then all through 1 Corinthians 14, edification by instruction. The word edify, you just think edifice. What is an edifice? It's a building. And that's what, to be edified is to be built up. But the building up doesn't come just by saying, hey, let's just, pep rally. It's done by instruction. And prophets had a miraculous measure of the Spirit that enabled them to reveal divine truths. All prophets were teachers, but not all teachers were prophets. So the idea of teachers are put with prophets sometimes, and it doesn't look like, well, let's turn over real quick to 1 Corinthians 12. 1 Corinthians 12. Paul gives a listing here of the spiritual gifts. There were 9 specific spiritual gifts. I mean, whoever has 8, 9, and 10 of chapter 12 Whoever has it, go ahead and read it.
For to one is given the word of wisdom through the Spirit, to another the word of knowledge according to the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, and to another gifts of healing by one Spirit, and to another the effecting of miracles, and to another prophecy, and to another distinguishing of spirits, and to another various kinds of tongues, and to another the interpretation of tongues. But one and the same Spirit works all these things, distributing to each one individually just as He wills.
Okay, thank you, Brother Gene. 1 Corinthians 14 mentions particularly 2 of those 9 that are there mentioned. What are they? Tongues, as well as the ability to prophesy. And he said the tongues were primarily for unbelievers, called attention to the ability that the man had, and then they would listen, as per Acts 2. But prophesying was more for the good of whom? The church, that edification. There was more teaching, there was more instruction given. And so hence by that, according to 1 Corinthians 14, people could be instructed, built up, or edified and exhorted through those means. So all prophets taught, but not all who are called teachers in the New Testament. For prophets are not listed there as spiritual gifted. And by the time the New Testament was complete, when it was complete, as was true of apostles, prophets were no longer needed, because when that which is perfect is come, that which is in part shall be done away. If you're still in 1 Corinthians 13, notice he doesn't mention all 9 gifts, but look at verse 8. Love never fails, but whether they be prophecies, they shall be done away. Whether they be tongues, they shall cease. Whether they be knowledge, it shall be done away. For we know in part, we prophesy in part, but when that which is perfect is come, that which is in part shall be done away. Well, the parts went together to form the perfect. What were the parts? The miraculous gifts. And the miraculous gifts actually were necessary to reveal what? What was perfect that was going to be coming?
That God was with us.
That God was with them. But the perfect would have been the completion of what? The gospel, the New Testament. And so here you have a prophet like Mark or Luke, and an apostle like John or Matthew or Peter or Paul. And one is revealing a part, another is revealing a part. And their miracles, of course, are verifying that they're speaking from God. They're writing these things down during the first century. But when that which is perfect, not when he who is perfect, but when that which is perfect, the completed will of God, then the need for those spiritual gifts that brought it along would not be necessary. Somebody gave me a little American Standard New Testament, it's a real pocket size, years ago, and in one of the pages toward the back, it has a picture that I've thought about trying to enlarge if I could, and maybe put it on the screen. It's very good. It shows this kind of a building, and involved in these are those 9 spiritual gifts. And in the building, you have a scaffolding that's surrounded. And the scaffolding was the miracles that put together, the completed will. And then it had an arrow pointing to the top that when the building was completed, that's basically when the completed will of God had been given, then there's no more need for the scaffolding. The scaffolding is taken down. The spiritual gifts are no longer needed. And if that's not the case, then do we actually have a completed New Testament? No. And so that's the reason that I really want to emphasize that. Comment or question, anybody?
One quick thing, you mentioned something women are not to speak in the church.
Yeah, address.
Can you contrast the setting that we're in now versus the setting?
Yeah, I think this is not the whole church come together. Yeah, this would be, 1 Corinthians 14, down in verse 23. If therefore the whole church be assembled together and all speak with tongues, and So you've got the church assembled, like we will in a few minutes, when Sister Eleanor and others come out, but not during our class period, but when we actually, the church is considered assembled, 10:30 on Sunday mornings, 5 on Sunday nights. And somebody asked me one time, well, what's the difference? Well, we designated it as such. Well, we could have everybody go over to Charlie and Robbins for a potluck. But that's not, and it might be everybody, but it's not the church assembled to worship, to do we might all play softball, out on a softball field. But that's not, it might be all of us, but we're not coming together for the purposes that are described in the New Testament. Is that what you're getting at, kind of, David? Yeah, great question. All right. Let's see. We talked about that. We talked a little bit about this, that when the prophets, when Agabus signified there would be a famine, then the brethren in Antioch determined to send relief to the brethren. They did it, sending it to the elders in Judea. And we pointed out, Randy, did we actually look at those passages? Honestly, I don't think we did. Turn over real quickly to Acts 20. This is so significant to get this firmly planted in our minds. And I think Acts 20 and 1 Peter 5 are probably two passages that help us out a whole lot in seeing that this idea of elders or presbyters, bishops or overseers, shepherds or pastors are 6 terms used for one and the same group of men. Look at verse 17. From Miletus, Paul sent to Ephesus and called to him what? The elders of the church. And when they were come to him, and then his speech begins there in verse 18. All right, now part of the speech down in verse 28. Take heed to yourselves and to all the what? The flock in which the Holy Spirit had made you overseers or bishops. And then their work is to shepherd or to feed the church of the Lord. All right, what were they called in verse 17? Elders. What are they called in verse 28? Overseers. 2 different words, see? Elders and presbyteros, and overseers or bishops, episcopus, and but they're one and the same group of people. It's interesting to know, though, that in verse 28, and all the flock, that gives you the idea of a what? A shepherd. And to feed the church of the Lord. He takes the noun and puts it in a verb form. You are to shepherd or tend or feed the flock of God, the church of the Lord, which he purchased with his own blood. All right, so you've got in the verb form of shepherding, he called to him the elders, but he says that the Holy Spirit had made them bishops or overseers. All 3 terms used to describe these people. Turn over to 1 Peter 5. 1 Peter 5. You would read the first 3 verses. David, if you would. 1 Peter 5, 1 through 3.
1 Peter 5, 1 through 3.
Right.
The elders who are among you, I exhort. I, who am a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that will be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly, not for dishonest gain, but eagerly, nor as being lords over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock.
All right. Now, what did he call them in verses 1 and 1? Elders. All right. So we've got presbyters. And in verse 2, shepherd. The verb form here, shepherd the flock of God which is among you, exercising what? The overseership. Same word as for episcopus. exercise the office, not of constraint, but willingly. Neither is lording it over the charge allotted to you, but making yourselves examples to the flock. You're like a shepherd to the flock. All three are used again. And so the emphasis seems to be when the word elders or presbyters is used as it is in 1 Timothy 4, age or the experience, just what the word elder or elderly means. And the bishops or overseers, that's their position. That deals more with the authority that they would have, the leaders in the group. And the idea of shepherds or pastors would emphasize the very nature of their work, teaching, guarding, guiding, making, just as a shepherd would lead the sheep into green pastures, protected from wolves. Then in a similar way, elders should, be insistent on teaching, making sure the gospel is taught, warn of false doctrines, identify false teachers, all that's a part of the work of elders. And so the important facts, presbyters did not differ at all from episcopoi, which is bishops over here, is evident from the fact the words are used indiscriminately, Thayer says. They were equal in rank. Peter called them fellow elders. There was a plurality of those in each congregation. They had no jurisdiction outside the flock in which they were members. They simply were we use the term, don't use it as much as we used to. Each congregation is autonomous or self-governing. And there's no tie in the New Testament. There's no ties to other congregations except, just by being brethren. But what people do in another congregation does not mean that's what we have to do here. And any got a comment or question? But Jean looked like you wanted to say something.
But all the congregations should be going by the examples of the word.
Yes, everybody should be practicing the same thing.
So where do you get, if you know a particular person and he's a minister, but he calls himself a pastor,
Yeah,
is that can only be true if he's an elder also?
that's right.
So if he's just a minister, it's really a misapplication of being called a pastor.
That's right. People have called me pastor, and I said, well, I'm really not. I preach, but I'm not a pastor from the point of view what the New Testament teaches. But some we know, Leon at Malden at Hansville is a preacher. He would be considered a pastor. He's not the pastor, but he's a pastor, a shepherd. Sewell Hall had been for years over at Emory Hills. A lot of fellows we've known who have been elders, shepherds, pastors, as well as preachers. 1 Timothy 5 indicates that that's possible. That's what you were getting at, David? Yes. But not the pastor at all.
Because there's never the pastor.
No, never is it the pastor.
It's always plural.
Always. All right. Paul called these elders. They're called overseers or bishops. And their work involves shepherding, a verb form of poimen, shepherd or pastor of the flock. 1 Peter 5, he addressed them as elders, instructed them to tend, poimen, the verb form, exercising the oversight. So you can just see, it doesn't take a Greek scholar to see how all of these words are used. And so God's organization for local churches described in the New Testament is a far cry from the organization seen in Roman Catholicism, mega churches, as well as denominations. I know we use that chart Sunday morning, but here we're introduced in Acts 11 to elders. And we're going to come again in Acts 15. And later on, we'll have them in Acts 20. But just get it really, really down in our mind about who they are and what the Bible teaches. Comment or question? Let's finish out on page 56. At the very top of the page, we answer that the messengers or carriers of the relief from Antioch to churches in Judea were Barnabas and Saul. And we read earlier the first note. The second note Acts 11:28 and 12:23 provide a type of a mile marker. Claudius, who is mentioned in Agabus' prophecy, began his rule in 80. In essence, the reason I put this note in is because you can almost deduce from what is stated here. You can walk backwards and see about the time that we have the conversion of Cornelius. Claudius, who is mentioned in Agabus' prophecy, began his rule in AD 41 and continued it until 54. Some date the famine around AD 44. Further, Herod Agrippa I, mentioned in chapter 12, died in AD 44, August, I believe it was. Therefore, reasoning backward, we learn the following. Since Barnabas and Saul stayed 1 whole year with the church at Antioch, Barnabas must have brought Saul to Antioch in the year 43. That'd be a year before. Further, 22 through 25 imply that Barnabas may have been at Antioch only a few months before going to Tarsus to get Saul. Therefore, Barnabas may have been sent from Jerusalem no earlier than the latter part of AD 42. Continuing, Barnabas was likely sent as soon as Jerusalem brethren learned of the good work in Antioch, which we would conclude that his preaching to the Greeks could not have taken place any earlier than the early part of AD 42 or the latter part of AD 41. And that would put Cornelius' conversion around AD 40 to 41. So if you think Acts 2, 29 AD 29, and then Acts 10, maybe AD 40, then you've got that roughly 10 years that are going on between Acts 2 and Acts 10. Does that make sense? So at some point in there, Saul was converted. All right. You can walk backwards on Saul. That's another exercise. Anybody else? We'll have to stop for time.